What's going on, everybody? KG here. So today I have two QD-OLED TVs, and they're of different brands. We have the Sony BRAVIA 8 Mark II and the Samsung S95F. If you could guess which is which, you could, win a prize. No, actually, you don't win a prize. But what is happening today is it is important to compare these two things out of the box to let you know how they're performing out of the box, because they have different characteristics. And I'm going to be running through filmmaker mode on this demo here, and then I'm going to go ahead and switch it to movie mode on the Samsung, which is going to use dynamic tone mapping. And to try to be fair to the Sony, I'll then switch it to brightness preferred on its tone mapping for its professional mode. And the reason why I want to do this is I want to give you a look at the two different ways that they're doing their tone mapping. And I think that's important because I don't think, it's talked about enough how the TVs are tone mapping. And tone mapping, there's no right or wrong way to tone map an image. So we'll take that same demo and we'll run it back. And I'll do this with 2 or 3 different demos. And I happen to like these demos. We'll try them, and then we'll also try some other stuff as well. It's not just going to be a video full of demos, but I do want to try some new things on this channel, just to give you guys a better look at how things work. I will put it into movie mode. So I'm going to switch the HDR tone mapping to brightness preferred on the Sony, so you can see the difference on what that does. And a lot of people are going to ask, like, why aren't you just switching it to cinema? Cinema is going to introduce the advanced contrast enhancement. And I'm just trying to look at what the dynamic tone mapping is doing here, because the Sony always has the dynamic tone mapping, but brightness preferred is a little bit different than gradation preferred. It's telling it to do different things. So, but interesting enough, there's times where the Sony actually looks like the brighter, more impactful TV with the brightness preferred on, compared to the movie mode here. I do believe this may be a little bit more brightness in brightness preferred than like when you switched it before. I don't remember there being such a dramatic difference between gradation preferred and brightness preferred. So maybe Sony tweaked the algorithms a little bit. But I did really want to show people this because it's pretty interesting. Yeah, I mean, just switching it from brightness preferred here back to gradation preferred. What a difference. Like, I don't remember that in the past. All right, so we're going to go back to gradation preferred for this, and then go to filmmaker mode, and then switch. It's over brightening the picture. You can see the difference, right? I've seen this scene on a professional monitor, and when you run it on numerous different TVs in their filmmaker mode, that's what they look like. It looks like it should look like. And then, when you move into movie mode, well, that's taking it to another level in terms of where the content is more of a preference now for people, which is fine. If that's what you want to watch, then that's what you want to watch. I'm just trying to explain the difference, and which one you might like is probably going to factor into a lot of this decision making. So switching gradation preferred now to brightness preferred, you can see it's doing a lot of the similar things. It's over brightening the scene quite a bit, but you know what? I have to say, I think that it's more pleasant looking on the Sony. It certainly is more impactful, surprisingly, on the Sony in brightness preferred compared to the Samsung's movie mode here. So I'm just gonna go ahead and run this demo. This is a very highly graded demo, which means that there's certain elements in it that are going to exceed the threshold of the TV, where the TV is going to be forced to tone map. But when you are looking at it on this level, it's going to over brighten the whole entire demo, not just the parts that need to be brightened. So that's the difference, is like if you're in filmmaker mode, then the parts that are meant to be dark, they're going to be dark, and you're going to see a lot more dynamic range, which is why I stress using something like filmmaker mode, because there is more depth to the image when you are going to access the dynamic range capabilities of your TV. And that's the whole purpose of HDR. That's why I'm really driving HDR on this channel, because I love HDR. I think that HDR is really misunderstood. It's not just a brightness booster. It's not just a shadow booster. Like, it's more about the dynamic range as a whole, right? So that's something that I like to talk about, and to show people that, this is why we buy these expensive TVs, so that we can unlock this capability. And you guys talk about the depth, the 3D effect. You're not getting the 3D effect when you're in something that is over brightening the picture. It might look certainly brighter, but I believe that you're getting a more depth from the image that is not over brightened. So really quickly before we move on, I want to show you a really good example of that. So here is the over brightened approach on the Sony, and here is the filmmaker mode on the Samsung. I hope you can tell on camera the difference in depth with the image. I feel like I'm getting a lot more depth from where those lights are in the background there, and then also the street lamp, just it seems to pop out more because we're not in that mode. If I switch the Sony now basically back to where it was to kind of match that, I just want you to see kind of the difference. I mean, just look at that. Do you see how it just shapes around and then now everything pops where it's supposed to pop? That is what makes HDR great to me, not this, where it's like everything is bright, which is certainly fine. If that's what you want to watch, then that's certainly okay. I just want to explain the differences to people so they understand. So, you know, I was looking at different skin tones in this demo here, and this is a Sony demo. And the first thing I noticed was I was like, that looks pretty red, you know? And I think, yeah, it's probably too red because all the other TVs didn't look as red as this. So can you fix this? Yeah, you can fix it. But the only real way to like fix it truly is to get a professional calibration, because it's going to vary out of the box. But if you want to like do like a quick fix, you could do an advanced color adjustment here. When it comes to color brightness, there's definitely cases where they look very similar, but in most cases, I do think that the advantage goes to the Samsung. And the advantage in brightness in general is going to go to the Samsung as well. It just presents a brighter, more impactful image. But the fact that the Sony trades blows as much as it does was pretty surprising, because the things I've heard about the BRAVIA 8 Mark II was that it's more in line with the Samsung S90F in brightness. But I'll tell you this right now, I had the S90F next to the S95F, and it didn't come this close to the S95F. It really didn't. So the fact that the BRAVIA 8 Mark II is performing the way it is really does show me that the TV is capable, and it is going to be one that if you desire brightness, I showed you earlier with the brightness preferred, you could certainly crank it if you need it. But, you know, if we're just even using gradation preferred, I mean, just look at how great they look next to each other. They both are going to do a great job at displaying bright, vivid content to you, because they're both QD-OLED, so they're both playing to their strengths all the time. There's a couple of things I do want to point out with this demo in mind. And, you know, I'm over analyzing a demo, I know. You know, I want you to take a look at the luminance difference here in the sky. So certainly the Samsung is really popping off the page here. And a lot of this could be just a matter of how the TV wants to be tone mapping, right? So here again, just look at how the balloons are sticking out. This is one area where, you know, I think Samsung versus Sony is an interesting comparison, because there's times where I expect Sony to be absolutely the sharper, clearer, more three-dimensional image. But on this particular scene, I'm seeing way more separation between the balloons on this image here. And it just feels like I'm actually seeing individual balloons. And on the Sony, it's more clustered up, kind of like they're stuck together. I hope that makes sense, and I hope you can somewhat see that on the camera, because I really feel like that red push is probably coming into play here on the Sony as well. But, you know, I do think that the balloons look sharper and they have more clarity on the Samsung here in this shot. So here we are in filmmaker mode and also professional mode with gradation preferred. Now let's go ahead and switch gradation preferred to brightness preferred for this particular demo. I just want to show you, look at the difference between that and this in terms of the overall luminance that you're pumping out of the TV. Because I was getting a lot of people saying, hey, you know, I like Samsung for their movie mode, but Sony doesn't have anything that quite matches that. This pretty much matches it in terms of the impact. I definitely think they've tuned the brightness preferred algorithm a little bit differently this year. At least that's what I remember. I could be totally wrong, and it could always have been how it operated, but I swear it has never been this bright in terms of like showing it compared to active. Like I always felt like when I used active on a Samsung, it was always certainly brighter than brightness preferred on a Sony. So, all right, so now I have both TVs maxed on SDR. Let's take a look at this. So if we're talking about SDR brightness, yes, it goes to the Samsung, and I think that's pretty clear. I certainly think, the Samsung is the SDR king. I mean, even next to the G5, it's the SDR king in a lot of cases. I do think, the Samsung is probably going to be the winner in most scenes for SDR, and that's just because it's a beast in SDR. But I do want to stress that the BRAVIA 8 Mark II is not dim. It's just not as bright as the Samsung. And this is a HDR comparison, right? So even my SDR portion is going to be in HDR, which is weird, but that's how it's going to be when you're looking at it. But really what we care about here is the luminance, right? And that's what's on display here. And I gotta say, Samsung's processing at times, it really does leave me speechless. Like some of the stuff that it's doing to the image here, it's kind of crazy. I've always thought that Samsung does a pretty good job with the, mountain ranges and rocks and things like that with their processing. It's always been a forte of theirs that it's not talked about enough, in my opinion. And at times in this demo particularly, it looks sharper. I do think that Sony is going to be the clearer one most of the time, but there's going to be these edge cases, and when those edge cases stick out, yeah, I think that there's something going on with the Samsung. I can't quite put my finger on, but yes, the edge enhancement is alive and well on both TVs. I'm not going to spend too much time on Spears and Munsell for this particular video. Sometimes I spend a little bit more time, but I am probably going to look at this a little bit deeper when we are doing a comparison of all four TVs, four flagship OLED TVs. Then I could tell you, a definitive answer on that. I just want to point out how impactful the Samsung is in some of these scenes for 2000 nit Spears and Munsell compared to the Sony. There's this sense that the Samsung doesn't have enough sharpness, and its sharpness is impacted by the matte coating, and it's just not true. Like, it is just not true. And you could see this when it was next to the G5. There were times where they traded blows with the sharpness as well, and the G5 is ridiculously sharp out of the box. So to see it doing a good job against the Sony tells me that they're both doing some sort of edge enhancement, right? It's not cut and dry on what those enhancements are. They're not telling us. That's the bottom line with the whole clarity discussion, is they don't tell us what they're doing. They market it and they talk about, things that they are kind of doing, but what does that even mean? Like, there's definitely some things that, you can see happening behind the scenes. I hope that makes sense. I know it seems like a little bit of a rambling rant, but yeah, hopefully that makes sense. I can't stress to you guys how really close all the flagship OLED TVs are this year. Like, I really can't stress it. I've seen the Panasonic already. I've looked at it for a couple of hours already, and I'm breaking it in still. I just took a little bit of a break to do this one, and I feel like, dang, man, they're all really close. And you could see it just even in demo content, in Spears and Munsell content like this. Like, yeah, they are very close. And even the color brightness, there is a slight advantage to the Samsung in terms of that. But I got a lot of questions like, hey, do you think that the Sony is that much worse than the S95F? And I'm like, I don't think it's worse than the S95F at all. I think it's pretty in line with it, actually. In a lot of content, they look very similar to me. And honestly, there's not too much difference. There is a luminance difference in the S95F at times, but most of the time, it's not really noticeable. And I'm surprised at how close they really are. Here's the alligator test for all you alligator fiends out there. I really think that, man, in terms of movies, they both really do it well. Sony is all about bringing cinema home, and, that's their catchphrase. And I really think, they really do kind of operate on that. They look good in movies. Every movie that I throw on the Sony just looks good. Like, it just makes everything look good. So no matter if you got older stuff or newer stuff, it just looks good. Though the competition is definitely getting very close. And one thing that Sony does really well is find details in certain areas. I'm seeing more detail in certain parts. The quiver for the arrows there, and then the fin thing that's popping off right there. All right, we're going to briefly look at gaming, and I'll do a separate full gaming in the near future, so stay tuned for that. And of course, we'll have the 4-way flagship comparison for gaming as well. There's so much with gaming that I'm still not ready to say is concrete, and I'm not ready to put in stone yet in terms of how they look. But here they are in brightness preferred and in active. And I just want to point out that the Sony fine details is incredible in terms of like just the details, the textures that you see here. This is Avowed. I have not played through this game. What I've played from this game so far and seen from this game, I'm not the biggest fan in the world. And here you go, guys. Here's brightness preferred versus active. Samsung is the king of SDR gaming, and they've been the king of SDR gaming for a very long time. But I do want to point out that like this is still very doable in SDR. It's just not the light cannon Samsung is in SDR. The menu is certainly brighter on the Sony. Like, wow, that kind of caught me off guard. Of course, like this is brightness preferred versus active tone mapping. I would definitely prefer to play on the Sony for this type of game. So on the Sony, you press the menu button to bring up the game bar, and on the Samsung, you hold the play button to bring up the game bar. And here's the difference between the two game bars here. If you're interested in any of these TVs, please consider using my affiliate links if you are buying them. If you guys do want to see that full gaming video, make sure you let me know in the comment section and hit the like button on this video so that I know that you're interested in that. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you in the next one.